Alright, Chapter 5, Episode 11. They had spent a week in Tayibe on a special training course. Israelis were world leaders in tricky assassinations. Most of their assassinations were never attributed to their assassination squad. Sally and Billy had been trained in their methods, but there were things to know before submerging into Syria. Damascus was, despite the mess it was in because of years of war and madness, a great old city. One of the oldest. Old enough to be in the Bible. Much different than Washington. Sally and Billy were fascinated with the inner city and also a little frightened. It was hard to imagine that more people needed to die. The recent war had taken over 300,000 lives, and it wasn't quite over. It had slowed. There was some sense of order, especially in Damascus. Aleppo was a different story. It had been trashed. The more Billy researched, the more he became disturbed by the madness of war. He understood the need to take out a few of the worst. They had names, both in Damascus and Aleppo. Their mission demanded, unlike their last takeout, subtlety. No bombs, no bullets, and no knives. Stay invisible and don't get caught. Sally wasn't thrilled about wearing a burqa. Not a law, just practiced by many Muslim women. But it was practical for walking around in Syria with the intent to assassinate a few military men. Not all of them were rebels. Billy did not like being in a country where ignorant extremists ruled the land with terror. He did like the assignment. Sally was free to assassinate as few or as many as was safely possible. Don't go out at night. Don't stay long. Anywhere. The sides in the war were not easily defined, but whatever the principle or ideology might be for any of the targets, they were hateful extremists, and some of them were causing a problem for the company. Sally carried a couple knives and a handgun in case she ran into trouble. Billy also had a handgun, but the job was to be done with a new weapon, an ancient weapon, poison darts. Sally had to have vaccine shots to handle the substance. It made her groggy for days. She had 6 darts from Damascus and hoped to use them all in one day. There was a big market where a few of the priority targets were known to take the liberty to show up on Saturday. Parade around. Billy was responsible for face recognition. He had most memorized, but also relied on his smart device. He had access to face recognition through the company, just about instant. The algorithms only had a few faces to look for. Billy had a yes or no in the time it took to pretend he was lifting the smart device to his ear. No sound, no find. Sound? Hello activated an empty text message to Sally that vibrated in her thigh. It was after an hour of walking about that Billy found a target. Sally followed the target for another 20 minutes before she felt right. The dart had a thin cellulose cover. Saliva could creep over the needle's point and work its way up to the poison. That would be enough to knock Sally out even with her vaccines. When she was ready, she pretended to rub her nose, drop a dart on her tongue, roll her tongue, and blow the dart into the man's shoulder as she walked by. He felt it. He stopped to reach for his shoulder. The dart fell to the ground when his clothing shifted. He looked around to see a few people avert their eyes. Sally and Billy were already lost in the crowd in opposite directions. An assassin of true quality did not stay around to gloat. Sally and Billy knew the man would be dead in less than an hour. First he would feel an itch that he would need to scratch. His skin would then become numb, as would the muscles under the skin. And shortly after that he would be paralyzed. He wouldn't be able to talk. Then he would fall over and slowly run out of air because opening up his lungs required muscles, and his heart was also a muscle. And he would die, staring at the people looking at him, wondering what was happening. After Sally had spent her 6 darts, they were taken to Aleppo. It was a long, hard week there. They were in over their heads, as the saying went. They managed to track down a few targets on their list. Many of them were unapproachable. There were still conflicts in Aleppo. Billy couldn't make sense of the heads. Some seemed to be getting weapons from the United States and fighting for freedom from the state, while the army was fighting them, and both were fighting the extremists. Sally took the liberty of taking out anyone from the extremists. She could move fairly freely among them. In the occupied zone is a quiet and dawdling bag lady that sold oranges out of her handbag. She was dirty enough to pass as someone men would ignore rather than take a closer look. She was happy to be out of Syria and back to relative sanity in Tel Aviv, where she and Billy spent a couple of weeks enjoying the nightlife and the fine foods during the day.